January is finally over. Hello, my friends. Welcome to February and my reading wrap up for January. I read 18 freaking books in January and I want to talk about them all. I also read my very first 5-star book of the year. And if you know me, I do not give out 5 stars very often, so let's get into it. My very first book of the year was absolutely amazing. It was Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I got this as an ARC from Berkeley. I am a Berkeley partner this year officially, and I was so looking forward to this book. My overarching review of this book is that it's unlike anything else Grady Hendrix has written. I think this took a lot of effort and it was well thought out and well planned before he even started writing. It is about homes for unwed mothers, teen mothers really, set back in the early 70s. And we follow these girls as they kind of live out their days in this home in St. Augustine until one day they come across a book on witchcraft. And it goes crazy from there. I do want to read something quickly from the author's note in the back. I know some people really believe that Grady Hendrix shouldn't and has no room to be writing women. And he does address that, and I just quick little blurb. Writing this book was my attempt to understand this hysteria and what we did to these girls. I don't think I gained that understanding, but I did gain a profound respect for the courage and resilience of the millions of girls we sent away. A childless middle-aged man is probably the last person who should write a book in which every character is pregnant, but I had the help of a crew who coached, consulted, and guided me, shared their birth stories, and did their best to keep me on the right path. He then goes on to name a ton of women, between doctors and lawyers and just the women in his life. And I think him putting that much time and effort into writing this book says something. The second book I read was a little bit of a flop. The book was The Last Word by Taylor Adams. The premise for this book is crazy pants. Basically, this woman is staying at this isolated cottage and reads this book called Murder Mountain, and it's like the shittiest book on the planet. It's written poorly, it's misogynistic, it's just like all of these different character tropes are just, oh my god, annoying. And so she gives it a 1 star and she says it like it is. She types her little 1-star review and then she starts getting stalked by the author. I felt like connected to the story because I am not afraid to write a 1-star review. I am not afraid to say my feelings. I think reviews are for readers. I would never tag an author. I would never purposefully tell an author that I disliked their book. I think that is disrespectful. However, if it's a Goodreads or a Storygraph or a Fable or whatever else, I'm gonna tell you what I'm feeling, even on just like social media. That's literally my job here. If I hated a book, I'm gonna tell you that. And this, The Last Word book, it wasn't that great. I think it could have been done better. Oh my god, next. This book was absolutely, it floored me. It's called Long Way Down. It's by Jason Reynolds. I actually got this recommendation from, I think her tag is The Book Was Better. And I was so interested, and all I heard about this book was it is written in verse, descending like an elevator, because this whole book takes place inside of an elevator. So it is written in verse, but it's so much deeper than that. So our main character's brother was just a victim of gun violence, and he was shot and killed. And all the brother has known his entire life is what you do when this type of thing happens, and one of the biggest things is you get revenge. So his plan is to go back up to his apartment, grab his brother's, now deceased brother's gun, and go and find the man that did this to him. So he goes up, he grabs it, he gets in the elevator, and then the elevator stops on every floor. And on every single floor, a different victim of gun violence gets on and speaks with the main character. I don't think I've ever read a book where I immediately finished and said that should be required reading. This is one of them. It really dives in deep into the cycle, the vicious cycle of gun violence, of violence in general, and especially in the Black community. Next is The Dark Convoy by my friend Kelvin. Kelvin did send me this to read and review. It is a cosmic horror story. It was so good. It was so well done. I think I'm not a huge cosmic horror fan. I think sometimes it can get a little too tentacly. This was not like that. We follow a pizza boy who's just trying to go on his deliveries when he comes across this like crazy thing in the sky, and he follows it and he ends up seeing some things he shouldn't have seen. And so this company has no choice to either A, him, or take him in. And so he starts doing jobs for this secret cabal company. The stories and what he has to do was so interesting and gross and just fun. If you've read The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchinson, I think you'd really like this. It was fantastic, and I'm so grateful that I have so many cool and artistic friends willing to send me books. Next is Bad Dreams in the Night by Adam Ellis. This is actually the very first horror graphic novel I have read. I have followed Adam Ellis on Twitter since he started the Dear David series, where he started tweeting the Dear David story. And if you don't know what that is, look it up on your own time. So it's been a very long time, and he came out with this, and I have had it on my TBR forever. I finally got it for Christmas, and it didn't let me down. I think sometimes you just know when someone is just an artist and a creative, and I think Adam is one of those people. These pictures, the art, the stories, everything is just, it's really great. I have nothing further to say. I don't think this is overly scary. I think these are very much a beginner's guide to horror or to spooky, scary stories. Some of them are even remakes of your classic scary stories that you know and love. So it's a very beginner-friendly book as well. Next, I read Horrid by Katrina Leno. I thought this was just a snooze of a book. Basically, this mom and daughter move back to the mom's hometown, but everyone's acting really weird about this return. In their return, the daughter ends up finding a room in their house, in the mom's childhood house, that's set up like a little girl's bedroom, but the mom said it was just a locked storage closet. So weird things are happening. However, it's not a slow burn. It was just like things are mysterious, and then the story was so boring I didn't care about the mystery anymore. And it wasn't that good of a reveal either. I don't know. I got it for the cover because I'm a big botanical horror girly. And yeah, let me down a little bit. Next is Can't Spell Treason Without T. This was my first cozy fantasy of the year. I have had this book for so freaking long. I got it as a gift from my friend Amber, and I've been meaning to read it, but for whatever reason I just couldn't pick it up and get to it. I'm so glad I finally did. It's a really sweet story that these two women who have been kind of secretly dating because one works for the government of sorts, they decide to kind of run away together and start their own tea shop slash bookstore. And all the mischief that comes with that, because basically she's running away from the government, and the other one is a really strong mage who also works kind of for their type of what is it? What is it? Not government. Government's the wrong word. I don't know. Oh, queendom, because it's a queen, not a king. Whatever. Cute, and it's cozy. There's griffins and dragons and all that type of stuff. Oh, and it's queer, so that's always good too. I had one DNF this month. It was Interview with a Vampire, if you can believe that. Interview with a Vampire is now one of my favorite shows of all time. I started it with my fiance earlier in 2024, and we ate it up. We watched it so fast. I could never see Louis and Lestat as anyone else other than the actors that play them in the show now. I think it was cast perfectly. I have no notes. It's beautiful and perfect and just amazing. And the book bored me. I don't know what it was. I don't know. I just couldn't do it. And maybe I'll revisit that at another time. Ooh. Next up is Never Let Me Go. This is one of those dystopian books that everyone has read, and I just hadn't gotten around to it. I finally read it, and then I also watched the movie right after I read it. This was really heavy hitting, and I think maybe because it deals with like younger teenagers and like you kind of know what's going on and they like kind of know what's going on. So in those terms, I think it's a slower moving book. Actually, I don't think it's very fast paced. I think the most emotional punch, the biggest impact hits you towards the end of the book. These children attend this type of school or this type of boarding school. It's called Hailsham. We follow Katie, Ruth, and Tommy, who are these three friends who attend this type of school. And we just know that they are there for a purpose, and they are going to be used later in their life for a specific purpose. Their whole lives have been leading up to this. That's all that is really important about them, is how they can be used for said purpose. And I'm not going to say what, because I don't think that's actually supposed to be said. I think you figure that out in the book. Very dystopian, very sci-fi. And the movie was also very good. Ooh, okay. Haunted Ecologies. This short story collection is by an author who I read a book of theirs last year, and it's to this day, one of like the most memorable world building situations that I've ever read. That book was called Living in Cemeteries. This Haunted Ecologies is a bunch of short stories about cursed nature, climate change, like bio horror, ecology horror, that type of thing. Basically how we are destroying the planet, and this is the planet fighting back. It was really interesting. I did not love it as much as Living in Cemeteries, but I also am not a huge short story collection girl, so that's probably why. But there were some really fun stories in there that, you know what, I'm glad the world is fighting back. Ooh, next is Worst Case Scenario. Okay, TJ Newman also wrote Falling and Drowning, and I really liked those. This one, the technical speak, let me back up. This one is about a plane crash. A pilot has a Widowmaker, crashes a plane into a nuclear plant in Minnesota. It causes a whole disaster, obviously. It's supposed to, something is gonna happen that's gonna be worse than Chernobyl, okay? Unless they figure it out and get it fixed quickly. So, I think the technical jargon and speak in that book made me completely back out of it. I was like, okay, this goes so far over my head. I don't know anything about this nuclear plant, and I didn't need to know this much about a nuclear plant in order to enjoy this story. Falling and Drowning, however, so good. And if you are looking for a really good airplane thriller, then again, maybe we stay away from airplane thrillers right now. Our country is not doing very well in terms of our regulations surrounding airplanes and airports, and our president is failing. So maybe you don't want something so close to reality. And rest in peace to everyone on that fucking flight. Sorry, I'm angry. Okay, never mind. If I get too much into that, I will turn red and start yelling. Speaking of things our government is destroying, the next book that I very highly recommend is called Beyond the Gender Binary. It's just an entire book talking more about non-binary identities and kind of what that means and how the author explored their own identity. And at the back of the book, there are some common arguments, which is just so stupid to say, some common arguments against these identities and what people come out and say. And so they're put here in bold. And then the author went ahead and wrote great rebuttals or retaliations against what those people say with different facts and things like that. So it's quite short, and I think it was necessary. I'm always going to keep learning about this type of thing. Next is The 3 Lives of Kate Kay. This is a thriller that I think should be more recognized as a literary fiction. I can see the thrilling parts, but I think its main genre should be more literary fiction. We follow this woman, Kate Kay, who also goes by 3 other identities. Something happened in her past when she was a child that made her run far away and never look back. And she has now written a book under a pseudonym, and she's never been seen in public before. The author herself, she has never been in public. None of the public knows what she looks like. So everyone just thinks her identity is a mystery, and she is deciding if she finally wants to reveal herself to the world or potentially be caught for the tragic event that happened in her past. I don't see it as much of a thriller. I don't think too many thrilling twists or turns happened at all. I think a literary fiction drama would be more accurate, but that's not to say that this book was bad. This book was really good and really interesting, so I still recommend it. Now, a book that I don't really recommend, The Chamber by Will Dean. I know he also wrote The Last Thing to Burn, and people are obsessed with that book. This was not very good, to me anyways. It's a bunch of deep sea saturation divers, and they are stuck however far below the surface for like a month together in a really, really small confined space in this chamber. And one of them ends up dead, and they think that it wasn't natural causes. So that's the premise. I was expecting this to deal more with the ocean, and I was really wrong. There's like nothing about the ocean in this. All of it is about like the deaths happening. And it was really sweaty and like humid and sticky. Where was I? There was not enough talk about the ocean. It was more sweaty and like claustrophobic. And again, very technical, but this wasn't overwhelming with like the technical jargon of The Chamber. It just wasn't, there wasn't a lot of focus on like them actually even being underwater. And I love like an underwater thriller. Ooh, next. Bat Eater and Other Names for Corazang. Oh my god, this book was so interesting. This lighting is horrific. So, Corazang is a crime scene cleaner, and she is grappling with some mega trauma from her past. So her sister recently passed in a really traumatic way, and so she is dealing with that. And then she starts realizing that there is a killer targeting East Asians in and around Chinatown. And she and the other people she works with kind of take it upon themselves to figure out what's going on. So this is set in early 2020. So the pandemic is rampant. So lots of themes of racism, but I think really necessary. We do not talk enough about how East Asians were treated in this country during this year, and this brings a ton of light onto that subject. And there is a lot of like interwoven storylines of hungry ghosts in this book too. Next, one of the best thrillers I've ever read, The Perfect Home. This was so good. Also, I'm a little biased because I love a thriller that has reality TV in it. I think that's so fun. So this couple are HGTV home renovation reality stars. And the man, the husband, is looked at like this hot, buff, heartthrob, sexy guy. And the wife is this like nagging wife, and she's not as good looking as him. So the whole world kind of views her derogatorily. One day, she is going through her husband's iPad, and she comes across a plan to enact a tragedy for TV because he is obsessed with being famous, with fandom, with the whatever, fandom. Fandom? I digress. She immediately goes on the run, because why wouldn't you? So this is actually being marketed as Gone Girl meets HGTV. It had so many good little twists and turns and things that happened. Oh my God. You're also getting double point of view from the husband and the wife. So you're seeing both sides play out at the same time. It goes a lot into misogyny and not believing victims, because the entire world basically immediately will side with the husband regardless of what happens. The ending was good. I think this was so good. Second last, we have Echoes in Dark Places. This is a short story collection. I keep doing this to myself. I don't like short story collections, and then I keep picking them up. This has to do with small towns and weird towns though, and that's obviously my favorite trope. There were some good stories in this. It is indie published, and there were some bigger mistakes than I normally like to see. I let a lot of things slide usually if there's mistakes in indie books, but this did have like a decent amount. If you can get past that, I think that this is a fun like small town horror story short book. If you're into short stories, that might be for you. It wasn't necessarily for me. Drum roll please, because my first 5-star book of the year is When the Moon Hits Your Eye. What is this book, you may ask? Okay, the moon turns to cheese. That's it. The moon turns to cheese, and the entire book is people figuring out what the hell to do about that. Something John did in this book I have never read before. Every single chapter is a different point of view. So you're getting point of views from politicians, billionaires, like TV stars, and then physicists and pastors and random teenagers in a cafeteria at their high school, or cheese shop owners in Wisconsin. And you may say, Kelsey, a point of view for every chapter? That's overwhelming. I understand why you would think that. It is not. The story flows so flawlessly, and some stories interconnect, but you're just seeing them from different points of view. And if there is a really hard flip-flop to a completely separate point of view and a completely separate story, there are still little tidbits that will take you back to what you had learned previously, maybe like 7 point of views ago. It was unlike anything I've ever read. I am telling you right now, this is a contender for a book that I loved on equal playing fields with Project Hail Mary in the sci-fi department. This is nothing like Project Hail Mary, no. This I would say is more of a sci-fi comedy. There are some science-y chapters. There's a lot of NASA scientists freaking out, which obviously, but it never bogs down the book. It's never redundant and boring. It is always something funny or new or exciting or interesting. This comes out in March. Please buy it. That's all I'm gonna say. If you are even slightly interested in space or sci-fi or any type of thing like that, or just like how humanity reacts to tragic events, this is the book for you. That officially was all of the books that I read in January. I feel like I'm sweating all over. Oh my gosh. I'll see you in February.